Don Global presents the DG Recruit podcast on everything headhunting and recruitment. Achieve the life and career you envision. What's up, game changers? It's your host, Don, founder of Don Global, the headhunting and career coaching company helping you achieve the life and career you envision.
In today's DG Recruit podcast, I'm going to cover 4 cold calling tips from my experience of what has helped me become a top biller year in and year out in recruitment, building out my own cold desks in recruiting pharmaceutical clients and candidates back in the day. So a couple notes, first of all, about cold calling. It has to be fit for purpose. So in the first 3 years of my recruitment career, I was recruiting basically people from anywhere $90,000 up to around $225,000. That's where my vertical, as in the specialism that I was tasked with recruiting for, that's where it kind of topped out. So in that scenario, your hiring manager is still reachable via phone because they're at their office, right? So this is in 2011 to about 2013 when I covered this technical market. And this technical market is a very traditional market, similar to many, many technical markets that recruiters recruit for. So it's pretty similar. So my point here is if you are recruiting for a regular technical traditional market, you need to be cold calling because the hiring managers are at work, likely. They're likely still working on site, like the directors. They're still locally based to the headquarters of their businesses. So they're likely still in the office. They likely have a phone line that you can dial through. So cold calling is really important in that scenario. Now, when I became an executive search headhunter, building out my network of venture capital funds, there is no real equivalent to that because if you dial through the main line, they're not going to send you to the CEO. Like that's just not how phone switchboards work, right? So they're not going to send you to, even if they send you to their admin assistant, all you're going to be doing is saying, can you leave a note? Like it doesn't work. You see what I mean? So that doesn't work. Executives typically, like I said, don't man their phone lines. It's usually somebody else doing it. So if you want to contact those people, you have to take another whole slew of strategies, which I talk about in my podcast and other trainings, but is not the point of today's coaching. So back to today's coaching about cold calling, you've got to understand, is it relevant to your business or not? Because if it is, 100% you need to be doing it. Here's another great example. Now I recruit for recruitment agencies. Recruitment agencies are cheap and disorganized, and they don't necessarily understand how the recruitment talent market works. They need a lot of coaching that they're too cheap to pay for. So God forbid I cold call a recruiting company. The chances of me wasting my time instead of getting a paying client is like 90%, okay? Because these people are not ready to spend money. So if you call a recruiting firm who by nature is cheap and wants to pay 20% rates, you're wasting your own time cold calling that client. You see what I mean? And then not to mention recruitment firms are ran sometimes by very shady people because there's no guarantee that they know what they're doing because anybody can start a recruiting firm. This is very different than my old clientele. My old clientele, pharmaceutical businesses, highly regulated, proper businesses. So a J&J, a BMS, they're definitely going to have recs and they're going to be ready to spend money because it's the biggest lobbying, business that there is in America, pharmaceutical lobby, right? So they got money bleeding out their wazoos and they got plenty of time and energy to deal with recruiters as long as you prove to them that you're legitimate and capable. Right. So there's 2 very different clienteles here, which is why I no longer cold call. I have not had to cold call since I started DG Recruit because I just put out a post online. I recruit recruiters. Boom. You got like a whole slew of recruitment agencies being like, oh my God, all rec to recs suck. We want you guys to recruit for ours. Then I tell them my rate and they're like, oh, it's too expensive. We can't afford it. I was like, see, you get what you pay for. Right. So that's why I don't cold call clients anymore. I also don't cold call candidates anymore. Why? Because candidates in my market are also not very valuable. The reason is because the majority of candidates in my current market quit. They don't stay. They don't stay in agency recruiting. So if I spend 8 hours a day cold calling clients and candidates, what I might end up with is really very little net gain. Because again, 80% of these people I speak to are not going to be placeable. Their next move is out of the industry. So why would I cold call them? Right? Like your odds are so poorly stacked against you. So this is why in my current business model, I spend so much time on social media, because that's the only way I can spread my actual message and hope that endeavoring people who are dedicated to agency recruiting actually spend the time to learn the information and then proactively reach out to me, instead of me wasting my time talking to 80% of people who are going to quit the business in 2 months to 2 years, right? And who aren't placeable because they're not looking to make the move to a type of client that I'm representing, right? So I just want to share that those two exceptions with you first and foremost before going into cold calling. Because again, if you're cold calling on those two markets that I mentioned, either executive or if you want to do recruiting recruiters or something similar to that in the terms of market dynamics, where the candidate pool, the client pool is not worth calling, then cold calling is a waste of your time, right? Because your ROI on your time is not valuable. Whereas before, like I said, when I call a director of medical writing, that guy or gal is not going to quit medical writing. They're going to stay in it. Their next move is senior director in medical writing. These are people that are very stable. They don't just up and leave their career trajectories. So people like that are very valuable to cold call, because you build a relationship with them and you can monetize that relationship for sure. Your odds of monetizing it is very high as long as you stay in touch with the prospect. So that's why I teach the whole golden looping process as well, which is also on this podcast and my other trainings. But again, different conversation point. Anyways, back to cold calling, right? So let's say you've determined, okay, cold calling is valuable. It makes sense in my market because each one of these guys and gals are going to earn me a fee of $30,000 to possibly $55,000 to $60,000 per placement. That's pretty worthwhile cold calling, especially if the odds of that particular candidate or client will be valuable and relevant in the next 1 to 3 years is also very prevalent. Then 100%, you need to be building relationships with people. And the best way to build relationships with them, if they're accessible, is by phone, because the phone is the first step to real human connection. Once you get them to be your friend via phone, that's when you can pitch for on-site meetings. That's when you can pitch for them to join your webinars. That's when the game starts. But you got to get them on the phone, because if you don't, then you're just another name. They won't know who you are. There is no relationship. Relationships don't exist until the phone comes into play. All right, so let's go through the 4 cold calling pro tips if this is relevant to you, if you figured out, okay, cold calling, I need to be doing it. Number 1 is your attitude. That is the most important thing of all before you start doing cold calling, because I have seen so many people throughout my life of both working at a large recruiting firm and starting my own recruiting firm, how terrified they are of human connection. And I don't honestly understand why, although I can think of a couple reasons. Some people might not feel comfortable with themselves. They don't feel value in what they bring to the table. And so they feel kind of like imposter syndrome, right? So if they call someone, they don't feel very confident because they're like, oh, I don't have a lot of value. So if someone does not feel that they have a lot of value, it will reflect in the way that they speak to other people. If you don't respect yourself, you're not going to carry yourself in a very self-respecting way. It's just kind of like chicken and the egg. Whereas if you know you have a very valuable skill set, that you are a valuable professional, that you are actually capable of doing something amazing for other people, you would likely feel very confident in your mission and feel that you're doing the world a disservice if you do not provide your services to the world. And that is how I see myself as a headhunter from the first day I got into this business. I realized I work a lot harder than my peers. I'm willing to do a lot more than my peers. I deserve to win a lot more and be paid a lot more than my peers. I'm very aggressive. I'm very ambitious. I have a lot of hopes for my future. For those reasons, when I make these cold calls, this is not a joke. This is not for funsies. This is real. It's real life. So how I come across during the phone call is going to dictate my destiny. It's going to dictate my future. If I take this cold call and I'm just like, Hi, I'm calling from Joe Schmo Agency. We do XYZ recruiting. I would love to talk to you about X, Y, and Z. Forget about it, as we say in New York, right? Forget about it. Like, you're not going to get any business because you sound and act weak. You don't take yourself seriously. You are not behaving as a leader, right? So, number one is when you are on a cold call, you are speaking to a stranger. Therefore, it's called cold. It's not a warm call, it's a cold call. This call is freezing. They don't know who you are. They've never met you. They haven't seen, they don't know who you are. They may have gotten your email, but they don't know your name. And my name is a bit of a weird one. So when I call people, I'm like, hey, it's Don Don. How are you? They're like, who is this lady? Never heard of her before. No idea what's going on. In that momentary time, they are confused because the way I talk to them is as if a friend picked up the phone and called them. And they're just hearing that tone in your voice and they're confused. Who are you? Why are you calling me? Why are you acting like you know me? It's because I'm confident and I'm not scared of you, right? So when I call a client or a candidate, I'm like, hey, how's it going? How are you doing, X, Y, and Z? I'm so excited I got hold of you. And people can hear the smile in your voice as well. So again, the first tip is you're excited and you're happy. That's your attitude. Your attitude is excitement and happiness. That is the underlying energy that your cold calling strategy is built upon. Okay, so that's how you're going to start the call. That's the script. The script is that simple. It's not, hello, I'm calling from Joe Schmo Agency. We recruit accounting and finance people. Nope. It's energy. It's, hey, Bob. Hey, Mary. What's going on? It's Don. I'm so excited I got hold of you. It's been so hard to reach you. I've been trying to reach you for quite some time. And then we go into the pitch, right? Okay. So number two, the second tip is once you got your attitude and your excitement and your confidence nailed down, the second step is actually care about what it is you're calling about. So this goes back to my previous point. When people start cold calling, their biggest mistake is that they're like, hello, I'm calling from Joe Schmo Agency. We do X, Y, and Z. You don't care. You don't care. You sound like a worker, right? You know how like you call Home Depot and you talk to someone who's just like a worker and they're just like, hi, this is Home Depot. How can I help you? That's equivalent of 90% of recruiters out there. That's just how they talk. Hi, I have a role. I'm excited to run it by you. I want to see what you think. To them, it's like, hi, the weather outside is 60 degrees. It's probably going to rain today. Get ready for rain, right? It's this, no one cares. A lot of people don't care about their job. And that's like cross industry. So this isn't like abnormal to recruiters and recruitment firms. It's actually common. In every single industry, you're likely to meet people who don't have an ownership mindset. You're likely to meet people who have an employee mindset. Now, my parents ran a Chinese restaurant ever since I was like 5 years old or 6 years old. I don't know, something very, very young like that. I remember growing up in my parents' restaurant, sitting on the rice patty, you know, like the big rice like containers, just literally that's childcare. That's how I grew up. So my parents have always taught me an ownership mindset, no matter what I do. So even if I'm working at someone else's office, I always have a good attitude and I'm always serious and like I take it seriously. I try to be supportive. I try to be helpful. I try to act like I at least try to give a crap, right? So when I work at the restaurant, even if the people don't tip me a single dollar, one time I was managing a whole table of like 20 people and they gave me $2 as a tip and their baby puked on the floor. I mean, this was a very poor area. People did not have money. So tips were really, really bad. But either way, I was friendly. I was happy. I was nice to people, right? You care. You care. You treat them like they're worth something. You give that respect to your customer. And that's what the second point is really about, is that you actually care about communicating your message to them. You're serious about what it is you do. And that is actually going to contribute to helping your customer trust you and want to work with you, especially in the headhunting space, right? Like if you want your customers to come and leverage you and use you in their, talent needs, you want to show them that you care. So that's why on the phone call, this is why when you go into your pitch, it's not just delivering your pitch, it's delivering your pitch with a serious intention. So when I call a client and I'm selling them a most placeable candidate, I'm serious. I'm selling that person as if they're my cousin. I'm like, hey, I'm representing this person. We got a really close relationship. I've built it over the last 4 years. This person does exactly what you guys need them to do. They are experts at, NDA submissions, that they can do the summary documents. They live right down the street, 15 minutes away. They would love to come work on site. They're available like pretty much the next month to start a new job because they're just not happy where they currently are. They're using me exclusively to look at the market. That sounds like a pretty serious sell. It sounded much more colloquial as well. It wasn't very formal. So that's the trick to cold calling. You don't want to sound like a robot. You want to actually sound like you're talking about a real person in a real situation. Flip side, if I'm headhunting a candidate at their desk, the same thing happens. Hi, Mary. Hi, Bob. It's been really hard to reach you. I'm so excited I finally got hold of you because I've been trying to reach you for quite some time about this senior level position that I'm headhunting candidates for. It's a retained search. I'm the only candidate headhunter working on it. And I really want to talk to you because, you've worked at Joe Schmo Company for the last 2.5 years. I'm assuming things are going well, but I would love to just show you potentially my services as to this particular role, or maybe some other roles down the line. The whole point here, again, is I'm just trying to make the connection. I specifically recruit for your market, and I would love to stay in touch with you regardless. So anyways, how are things going this year? And then that's where we're gonna go next, right? So this is tip number 3, is you have such a great tailored pitch. Not only are you serious, not only do you care about your candidate and client, you actually have a tailored pitch. Those are all examples that I just gave you of a tailored pitch. Those are tailored pitches, right? You're going to pitch it so that it's exactly what they want and need because you already know the answers to the test, right? Like, you know what they want. If it's a hiring manager recruiting for a biostatistician, guess what they're going to recruit for? A biostatistician. If they're the director of the biostats team, guess who they're going to want? A biostats guy or gal with a PhD in biostats, ideally, or in mathematics, okay? Right? You know that that's what they want. And they also want someone who's already worked in pharma. They don't want someone who's never, ever worked in pharma. That doesn't make any sense. They don't want someone coming out of manufacturing in food industry that has never, ever seen, what it's like to run an oncology trial. Do you see what I mean? Like, you need to know your customer base. And knowing that, you should have a surefire, rapid, tailored pitch. No stuttering, no nervousness, no confusion on your part. You know exactly what these people want and need. And that's what you're here to deliver them on, because that is literally your job, right? This is where I see a lot of people, again, go wrong because they're now shocked that the phone call is going anywhere. And they're just kind of like, oh, crap, let's wing it. Don't wing it. You should know exactly what needs to be said. And then the next step, right? So number 3, just to finish on this tip, you should have your client conversation points clearly laid out. You should have your candidate conversation points clearly laid out as well. These are not confusion areas. You already know exactly what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, what the call to action ending sequence is going to sound like. So as in the last question you ask, right? I gave some examples earlier. Some last questions that you can ask are like, what's going on this year? How are things going for you this year? How's hiring looking? What's happening in your team right now? How does this candidate sound? What do you think of this candidate that I just walked you through their background, right? These are a number of different closing questions. They're not even closing questions. They're more like opening questions. You're opening up the conversation for a longer, elongated conversation, right? So that's the point, is that you're trying to tailor your pitch to every single person you talk to, that you are well prepared, well in advance, so that you're not stuttering and figuring things out on the fly, because that is the most unprepared way to do sales. I managed a guy like that. He was my first managing responsibility, and he just didn't care. It wasn't like he couldn't speak well if he wanted to. He just did not care. And when you don't care about something, you're not going to sit there and figure out, how am I going to be the best communicator? You don't care, right? If you don't care about being an amazing communicator, you will not spend the time to become one, right? So it comes from caring about your professional capability, caring about your professional future success in this endeavor. And hopefully that will give you the kick in the butt that you need to put in the time to become a really good communicator. Because this job is like basically just communication. That's really it. Like recruitment is just all communication, whether via email, whether via phone, whether via writing, whether via social media. It's just communication. The whole job is communicating, right? Communicating between different parties with a little bit of admin, like writing stuff up. Other than that, it really is just figuring out how to say things to people. So that is why you want to have a surefire, tailored pitch that you know how to deliver with your eyes closed so that you're not struggling on the call being all like flustered. Okay. So number 4, the last pro tip for cold calling is you got to be on that note, adept at next steps. There are 3 possible outcomes of every cold call, and I'm going to go through it. The first outcome is go time. The second outcome is no time. The third outcome is future time. So let's go through go time. Potentially on a cold call, you will win. That doesn't happen a lot, but it might happen. As in, you call and you cold call and somebody picks up, you guys are having a great chat. You hit them on the perfect day. I mean, all the stars are aligning for y'all. Like this candidate wants to look for a new job. This client wants to hire. You just came in on that right day. Good for you. Lucky you, right? You came in at the right time. So now it's go time. And when it's go time, you need to know all the correct processes. Again, back to the previous point, you cannot be flustered. Like, what do I do now? Oh, what do we talk about now? No. You already know what the process is. Get the job spec, get the go spec, get the information, and then talk about process, and then talk about salary range, then talk about signing terms, and then negotiating terms, then talk about next steps, then arranging meetings. Like your process is set. You know what that go time looks like. That is what go time looks like. All right. You have a clear idea of what go time is. Second, no time. That's an option. Client goes, I got no time for you. I don't want to hear from you. Go away. You need to stop calling me. Goodbye. Hang up the phone on you. That's a no time situation. And that is a true no time situation. Because I've had clients say, I have no time. And then I just go, oh, I totally get it. You're really busy. Of course you have no time. Let's continue, learning more about this candidate though, because it's so hard to find these people. I just want to still ask you, what are the odds that you might need someone like this down the line? That is a testing question, because sometimes people say they have no time, but they do have time, but they're just programmed to say that they have no time, right? So the easy way to test that is to do the AIR method, which I always naturally do. Somebody told me that I do this. It's called the AIR method. Acknowledge, ignore, resume, right? So I do acknowledge, ignore, resume all the time to test if they really have no time, because the clients that truly have no time will actually hang up on you. So the clients that say they don't have time, they might have time. And then therefore you go back to strategy number 1, which is go time. If they really genuinely do not have time, they will hang up on you. They will, because they're really busy. They're like, oh my God, this person's not getting off the phone. I got to go. I'm so sorry. Goodbye. And they will do that. Humans are naturally programmed to be very friendly and rule abiding for the most part. People are really programmed to do that. Nowadays, of course, that might be changing because the rules of etiquette are changing. But for the majority of people who are in a white-collar professional space, they're more or less likely to be more polite rather than not. So I actually don't have a terrible perception of people on the phone, because I have that natural belief that the majority of people aren't going to be rude a-holes. Okay. I really don't think they are. Especially if you come at them in a very reasonable, logical way where you sound like a real human. When you sound like a real human on these cold calls instead of like a robot, and when you sound like somebody warm and approachable and you have a really nice tone of voice, people will listen, because it's so rare. It's so rare to come across like a good communicator. It's like really hard actually to find people who are entertaining and good at communicating, because people like that are usually like social media stars and they go on to do influencing and other things. They're in the acting sphere. They're in comedy, whatever. They're not in sales. A lot of people in sales just are in sales for whatever reason, right? So, but the best salespeople tend to be like that. The best salespeople tend to be engaging, charismatic, like attractive. They have a very attractive quality to them. So anyways, in this scenario, if a client really has no time, then you have your process. And what is your process? When a client has no time for me and they hang up the phone on me and they're so busy they can't hear from me, I'm going to call them maybe tomorrow. I'm going to call them maybe as soon as tomorrow. I might call them next week, but they're getting a call back. When someone tells me they have no time and they don't want to talk to me, that does not mean that I ignore them for the next 2 to 4 weeks. That's insane. If I know that they have a rec and I want that rec, I'm going to call them tomorrow because they're going to forget. They're going to forget that I called them and they said they were busy and then they hung up the phone on me. They will not remember that. Nobody does. Think about it. When was the last time you remembered somebody who called you and then you like hung up on them? You don't clock those things. You just move on, right? You're not actually thinking, oh, it was that lady Don. You're never going to think about that. It's just, some random person hit me up and I didn't have time to talk to them. Maybe I would have talked to them if I had more time, but I didn't have more time. They sounded nice. I wish they called back, but I don't know. They might even want you to call back. That's what's the crazy thing, right? If you sounded really good on the pitch, they might have even wanted you to call back. So again, you're doing them a favor. I mean, that's how I see sales. I'm doing you the favor, genuinely. I am the one that is better than all of my competition. I will work harder than everybody else. I'm so good at my job. You are losing out not using me. You need to use me. You need to know me. I need to exist for you. That is the level of mission that top salespeople feel because they feel such a great sense of self-worth, which underpins their confidence level. Right? So when a client says they're too busy and they cannot talk today and they hung up the phone on me, I might call them as soon as the next day and or the following day, the second following day, right? Because again, they're not going to know, they're not going to remember. So that's your process. The third one is future time. So a client might tell you, hey, I don't have time right now, but I love your energy. I love, what you do. And I do want to talk to you. I've seen some of your emails come through. I've seen you on social media. I would like to talk to you. When can we speak again in the future? That's an easy one. That's a future time situation. So in that process, you then say, wonderful, let me take down your email. You have a process. Again, workflow. You get their phone number. You get their email. Phone number could be cell. Ideally, I'd love to get your cell number because then we can communicate offline depending on wherever you travel and you can reach me anytime. Cell is probably the easiest way to get in contact. What's the best cell number to reach you at? Boom. Can I please have your cell number? Would it be nice if you could give it to me? No, just, hey, I prefer to use cell because cell's the easiest way to communicate with my clients. It's the fastest way to send candidate information, just get back to you on stuff. What's the best cell number? Just send it to. Take no prisoners. Just ask, look, this is what I need. Let's go. Next step, I also need your email. I need your email because then I want to send you, the candidate information so that we can see what you think of some of these profiles. I have a few profiles to run by you. And certainly I want to see what you think of them and then also get your interview availability so that I can set it up on your calendar. So what's the best email to get? Boom. All right. Get the email. Great. Awesome. I'll follow up. Thank you so much. Part of your process with clients should absolutely entail a meeting of some sort, right? Meeting is really important. That's the next step up from a cold call is an in-person meeting. Now, if you're trying to become famous in your market and you want to monopolize those relationships, you do need to meet and greet your customers. It's actually really, really important because you want to have the strongest relationship with that client. So you always have to batch your meeting schedule. So but before, I used to do a lot of meetings. Nowadays, like I said, my market really, they don't need all that because my competitors are so bad, honestly, that it doesn't really matter if I meet my clients or not. But in time, I do. Obviously, all my New York clients, when I have time, I go meet them. But before it was really important because before I was working with very desirable clients that many candidate hunters want access to. And again, in a competitive situation where you need to stand above the pack, you do have to make time to do things that they wouldn't do or would find harder to do in order to get a competitive edge. Right. So in those scenarios, 100%, if I landed a freaking big old client account, I'm making it on site. First of all, I'm curious. I want to see what a big pharmaceutical company looks like, right? I want to see what this whole thing looks like. In a recruiting firm, no offense, I don't need to go see them. I've worked at one for 5 years. I worked at one of the best recruiting firms. I don't need to see your office. I'm assuming you have chairs and desks and stuff. But when you're doing other types of markets where it's a different market, it really does make a huge difference because you want to tell your candidates, hey, I've been to that office. I know what it looks like. Here's like the vibe, right? Because you also have to explain it to your candidates. So there's a lot of value in meeting clients, and that is part of your process, right? Your future time process. And it's also part of your go time process, which is like your clients are like, let's do it. I love this energy. I love working with you. I want to work with you. I want to see what you got going on. That's even better. So one of my first clients, what I did was pitch a meeting, drive to Jersey, bring all my resumes, and I locked up like 4 interviews on the spot because it was just like, I'm here. I drove here. Like, let's do this thing. Let's look at your calendar. When are you free? Okay, cool. Let's slot these candidates in. I walked out of that meeting with more client commitment and 4 interviews locked up for that same job, right? Because I brought all the resumes. We looked through them. All the candidates were pre-qualified, pre-agreed to go and look at the role that I'm recruiting for, and walked out of there with all these interviews booked. That's a process. That wasn't by fluke. It wasn't an accident. It didn't just happen by happenstance. It was planned. I called all the candidates in advance. I told them, I'm going to go see this client. It's likely that I'm going to have interviews lined up for you. You give me your availabilities. And then when I go and see the client, I pull out all the resumes that are all beautifully designed. Then I give all the time zones of when the candidate can speak. And then I book it on everyone's calendar. And I walk out of that office with all of my homework completed, except sending out and confirming the email invites, right? Then the next step is career coaching, making sure your candidates are ready for the call, and then setting up a debrief time with your client. I mean, this is all stuff that, again, is process driven. This is all by design. You already know that these are things that you're going to have to do next because it's part of the process. All right. So these are the 4 cold calling tips to recap. Number 1, you're going to have an excited and happy attitude to every single cold call. You are on your game. Don't make a phone call if you are not on your game. Don't do it because you're going to fail. There's just no point. Every phone call has to be perfect. I've never had a phone call where I was not energetic, not upbeat, not on my game. Then don't call. You're literally better off not calling. Right? Because the minute you call, there is a likelihood that they might remember who you are. And if that call does not go well, does not look good for you. So don't call unless you are calling with an excited and happy attitude that is going to make an impression on people. Otherwise, you're just going to ruin your own professional reputation on the street. Number 2, when you are on that call, actually care and be serious about your value proposition, about what you're reaching out about. Number 3, make sure that you are pitching perfectly. Your pitching has to be amazing. It cannot be a test run. It cannot be an experimental call. It's got to be pre-prepped. You got to prepare. And prepare means you're doing it in advance. Your pitch is so darn good by that point that you are not making any errors. That phone call is going real good and you are sounding like a broadcaster. That is the level of communication excellence required if you're selling to executives. Again, this is executive level selling. You're not selling to some person off the street on like, do you want to buy a pair of sneakers? No, it's not that. It's selling a very high-end product that is worth $30,000 to $50,000 a pop. Right? So you have to sound different than the person who's like, hey, would you like to come to the club tonight? This is a different sales level. It's a very senior sales level. So no stuttering, no like flustered behavior, no verbal tics, just perfection. And that is how you have to conduct yourself. And then the last step is be adept at pivoting to whatever the next step is and closing out the process properly, whether it's go time, no time, or sometime in the future. All right. I hope this was a helpful podcast coaching on how to amp up your cold calling skill sets. And make sure to, as always, give us a review if you enjoy the podcast. And make sure to tune in and ask me any other questions if you have any other concerns.